Comhairle, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the Sustainable Development Committee. This is the final meeting of the year. Warm welcome to you in the chamber and also to you coming in online. Just a bit of feedback, I don't know what that is. However, as always, we begin the meeting by prayer, and I'd like to invite Councillor John A. McKeever to lead us in prayer. Thank you, John.
Heavenly Father, grant us light that we may know the wisdom that alone can give, that truth may guide wherever we go, and that virtue bless wherever we live. Lord, guide us today as we meet to decide, discuss, and debate the various issues that we have on our agenda here. We thank you for all those that have prepared these reports for us, and we thank you for those that have facilitated these meetings, both here and online. We ask your guidance, Lord, that we come to decisions that will benefit all those that we are here to represent, from the southernmost tip of Battersea to the northern tip of Lewis, and all those in between. And as we face the end of another year, Lord, we think of all those that entered 2021 and are with us no more. We ask you to be with their families, Lord, and their friends and colleagues as they face a festive season and a new year with their loved ones. And we know, Lord, that although there's a month left to go, that many will still not see 2022. Our friends, it's time to make your election sure as before it's too late. The voice of Jesus calls you be in time. But if in sin you longer wait, you may find no open gates, and your cry be just too late, be in time. Oh, comfort all those that are needing comforting. Be with all those that are unwell at this time as well. Help them return to good health, Lord, so they can continue to be the wonderful assets they've been to their families and friends and colleagues. Give us humility, Lord, and help us to understand that there are some things here that we cannot change. Give us courage to change the things that we can in this ever-changing world. And things that were once right are now wrong, and things that were wrong are acceptable. Oh, courage, brothers, do not stumble, though the path be dark as night. There is a star to guide the humble. Trust in God and do the right. Oh, perish policy and cunning. Perish all that fear the light. Whether losing, whether winning, trust in God and do the right. Yes, some will love you and some will hate you. Some will flatter and some will slight. Oh, cease from man and look above thee. Trust in God and do the right. For he is a trusting God, a true God and a loving God. And he will care for you and he will protect you and he will keep you. The Lord shall keep thy soul, he shall preserve thee from all ill. Henceforth thy going out and in, God keep for ever will. The Gollamachs the Yachgestiach quad it jegna, on Amash Shawnish a haum, so shin a mach gebrach. Maar in your pecken and gleges dienschen, is gachriest, amen.
Thank you, Mr. McKeever. I think we've sorted the feedback. It was the convener. He's confessed to leaving his mic on. Thank you. Just the usual housekeeping rules. I think we're all familiar with them now, so there's no need to go through them. Just to remind you that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed. On behalf of the committee, I would like to welcome Mr. Clive Downing, Scottish Government R100 Programme Director, who is with us today to take us through a short presentation on the latest position regarding the programme in the Outer Hebrides. And with the committee's permission, I'd like to take this item first. So welcome, Clive. This is item 4 on our agendas, and the report provides an update on the rollout of the Scottish Government's R100 broadband programme in the islands, which will be available to some by 2021, and the options that will be available to those until the next phase, 2022 to 27, and for those who will not be included at all. So I will ask Joe to speak to the report first, and then I'd invite Clive to do the presentation, and we'll have a short Q&A after that. So Joe, if you could come in, please, speak to the report first.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I've summarised in the report the latest position as we understood it in terms of the report and the rollout of R100. And of course, it covers the background to R100 and then the details of the rollout in terms of the scope of that rollout having now been finalised. So very much report prepared with a view to getting a more detailed update from Clive, and delighted he's here and willing to come to address the committee. And as members know, this is a critical project, a critical issue, particularly highlighted for us because of COVID, and highlighted as a key action within our joint Comhairle HIE economic recovery strategy. And of course, the Council has always adopted the position, Chair, and as members will be aware of, ensuring that there should be an equality of service across all our islands and all our communities. So happy to leave it at that and to move to the presentation and to the Q&A as appropriate, Chair.
Thank you, Joe, and a warm welcome again, Clive, and in your own time.
Thank you, Chair, very much, and also to the committee for inviting me to talk here. I'll share my screen now, but while I do that, just to reiterate, I am going to go quite quickly through the slides, but obviously the information remains on them, so if anyone has any questions that we don't get to in the session, or indeed wants to follow up, or indeed invite me back for future sessions to give you future updates, I'm very happy to do that. I'll try now and open. A presentation. Are we seeing that, Chair? Is that,
No, not yet, Clive, but
I don't think our broadband's good enough.
well, I walked into 1A. So,
well, Clive, we've got the presentation on iPads. So, do we all have a presentation? We should. Yeah. We should have.
There it is.
Okay,
that's us, Clive.
A bit of a,
yeah.
Okay. Right. So thanks again. As I said, I'm Clive Downing. I'm the Programme Director for Reaching 100% Programme. This slide is as I say, I'm going to go through quite quickly so we can get probably onto the more meaningful questions and answers and discussion. So the 100%, it's a super fast programme. So on the back of the 2016 Scottish general election, a commitment was made to get everyone to a super fast service. As we stand at the start of the programme, the small orange slice on the left-hand pie chart was what was left across Scotland that was not super fast, premises that were not super fast connected. And that breaks down to the pie chart on my right, hopefully on your right too, which shows the remedies that we're using to fill in that slice. So the larger orange segment is what we have in a contract with with BT being delivered through Openreach. That actually is a slight error on the legend. There is all contracts, north, south, and central. The grey chunk of that pie is our premises that are eligible for the Scottish Broadband Voucher Scheme, and the smaller blue chunk is what we have been told is going to be delivered by commercial operators, which will eat into that target. Right, now I have pressed to move my slide on. Yes, we've got one, that's good. So the 100%, there's often a bit of confusion about what 100% means. And a lot of people take it to mean that they're part of the Openreach contracts, part of that contracts. But we are responsible for all premises, so 100% is every premises in Scotland. And we have a number of remedies to actually sort of fulfilling those and getting them connected. As I mentioned on the previous slide, we are monitoring and trying to encourage commercial operators to build as much as possible. And in fact, from a state aid point of view, we're not allowed to subsidise build to premises if there are commercial plans, whereas we're not allowed to distort that market. The main thrust of the I'll keep talking. It's obviously a bit of a lag on this. The main thrust of the remedies, if you like, to get connections are through three main contracts. I'll talk a little about them in a minute, and how we actually have mandated some fibre coverage to try and get more fibre out to more remote areas of Scotland. We are very aware that that is not going to connect every premises in Scotland, and to connect those premises we have a voucher scheme, which I'll talk a little about later as well. And also we're very alive to other public sector projects that are ongoing in Scotland, infrastructure projects, delivering telecoms infrastructure. There's a number of these. They're funded and managed through local authorities with BDUK, or other Scottish government programmes such as the Scottish 4G infill programme, which has put some masts up on or in the Western Isles. Quick note on the contracts. The committee may be aware we had some legal challenges with the North Loch contract award, which sadly puts back a full year in the resolution. However, that deployment is now underway. It includes an additional 16 subsea cables serving 15 islands, 15 because there's an island that goes in and out of Fair Isle en route to Shetland. The other two contracts of lost interest to this audience are the Central and South lots, and they've been built underway since the award in 2019. So there's been progress across those lots. Just in terms of progress, I mean, this is a national picture, but it does show that things are starting to happen. There are 20,000 surveyed premises. We've changed the contract slightly to try to reduce the number of premises that are initially indicated to get built and then for whatever reason drop out. So we actually get a commitment to those connections at survey, and the contract is being constructed to discourage any change from that and actually encourage build to the premises that are contracted and on the date that they are contracted to be built to. There has been some challenges with that, to be frank, but we are, that's a general principle under which we are moving forward. At the minute, as I say, we're late starting the North Loch build, but there are actually about 90 premises already live under that build. That's a small number. The first major milestone contractually will be the end of Q1 next year, i.e. March 31st, 22, when we get the first reports of the first build. I mentioned mandating fibre build in certain areas. We identified 9 areas across Scotland where there was no fibre at all, and yet still a fairly dense population in terms of numbers of properties. Bonchut's area in the Western Isles was around Timsgarry. That was put into the contract, and basically the bidders had to commit to connecting a gigabit connection to at least a quarter of the premises in that area, and that would try and remedy the dearth of fibre in these areas. And these were, this area as a local example to yourselves, but some of the smaller islands, Shetland, Jelland, and Orkney were also mandated, as well as some remote areas in Highland, Agglesbury on the west coast. We also removed urban premises from the contracts. It's very much a rural and remote programme, and also we removed premises that are already getting over 24 megabits per second. The committee may be aware that the current measure of superfast is 30 megabits per second, but previous projects, the ones run by Highlands and Islands Enterprise and Scottish Government, the bar for superfast was 24. So what we didn't want to do was replace investment on a premises already getting NGA broadband by the old measure, and then overbuild that, or allow the market to overbuild that through these new contracts. I mentioned the voucher scheme. The three components. The £400 interim voucher in the middle was or is available to premises owners to get a service that allows them to get superfast. Primarily, that will be a satellite or 4G solution. It's intended as seen as an interim, but also, frankly, it could well be for some very remote premises the only solution available. However, if they're not in the main contract, in the main build, those premises will be eligible for a main voucher up to £5,000. The intent there is to try and get a better quality type of technology to those premises, and these vouchers can be aggregated, amalgamated, and offered to operators to allow them to actually build infrastructure to certain areas where there are groups of premises that are all voucher eligible. There's a UK scheme you may be aware of. So that seemed to do that on its own. There's a UK scheme which you may be aware of, whereby £1,500 is available for residential use, and we will actually, where we can, combine that with the Scottish voucher to allow up to £6,500 for residential connections and £8,500 for businesses. The broadband voucher scheme is actually there's about 60 odd suppliers on it, including Openreach, including some of the bigger players such as Virgin, Cityfy, but also a large number of smaller and medium-sized operators. And we have a system in place where they can go and identify premises which are voucher eligible, and they'll see that on a geographical format and a map-based format, so they can go and look at the areas that they would like to deploy infrastructure, and actually the premises that are eligible for vouchers will be identified, and that operator can then go and market to those premises owners and basically use with their permission the vouchers available to their houses. The idea there is that the operators, the market, will go out and actually do that coordination and identification of premises, and it's not down to community champions or community councils or or individuals who are motivated to have to do that on behalf of their community. So what does this mean for the Western Isles, the Comhairle? These numbers, obviously, there's quite a lot to take in there, and they will remain on the slide for you to peruse in your own time. But the key elements here, there's over 2,083 premises which are in scope to be connected with full fibre to the premises as part of the R100 programme, and that leaves just over 2,002 which are eligible for vouchers. Another key part of the programme is we have a role within a number of people within the programme called deployment managers, and they are ready to work with stakeholders to ensure that where possible, all the remedies available to us, the contract, the vouchers and commercial build, are coordinated and brought together in any particular area, so that these people will allow basically look at areas where there are challenges. We'll work with operator cohort to try and get build done. They will also work with the main contractors as the Openreach, as the build extends and surveys are done. They will look to identify properties that could be reached for that build, either because they're very close and it's a no-cost additional premises, or because they fall within the cost envelope of a £5,000 voucher, and that money can be used to extend that contracted build. Just as an example of some of the challenges we face, obviously, Comhairle in the middle of that map. The blue dots are premises that are already getting 30 megabits per second. So these would have been delivered by the DSSB HA programme. The premises we are delivering by the contractor are green, and the voucher eligible premises are orange. So you'll see along the top in southeast, basically the northeast, sorry, there are groups that could be attracted to operators, and it's important to remember when I talk about operators in this instance, we are very alive to the fact that in the Western Isles, Openreach are probably the only viable alternative, viable operator at all, and there are not many other operators. So two elements there. We're looking to see what other operators we can introduce and bring into the area, into the islands. But also we're very alive that we have to work very closely with Openreach to optimise the build that they're doing under the contract and add where we can to that through the voucher schemes, as I say, coordinated by our deployment managers. I mentioned Scottish 4G infill programme. This is the Harris, the base of Harris along the south there. The green build there, when we first got a bid from Openreach back at the end of 2019, none of those premises were included in it. They were all deemed too expensive, and the cost of engineering to those premises was too much. The S4GI programme put in a mast at Manish, and the fibre backhaul route to that meant that because of the delay, ironically, when we redesigned and we had a new design for build in the islands in June, these premises costed in. So all those premises along the base of Harris, the south coast of Harris, are now included, or the green ones are at least, and it's meant that the cohort of premises to be connected, the orange dots, has significantly reduced. Obviously, bringing them, making them perhaps easier to bring in when we optimise build as it happens. Very quickly then, in terms of Project Gigabit, which is a UK government programme, and how that links up with R100, we have had some additional funding from UK government to R100 to flip some technologies. When I say flip, this is where the build had previously been designed to be fibre to the cabinet, a slightly obsolescent technology at the minute, and that money allowed it to change to fibre to the premises technology. So at the minute, R100 is, in terms of the main contracts, are all full fibre programs. So anything being built and from now and in the future will be full fibre. We are limited in terms of how much money we can add to R100. You'll be aware of the concept of state aid. This is monitored through Building Digital UK, and it hankers over from sort of pre-Brexit days of European Commission. So we're not allowed to add more than 10% in terms of funding to any of the contracts we have, as there's a concern that would allow a state aid challenge. Scottish Government is working with UK Government on Project Gigabit. At the minute, the UK Government has announced an 85% ambition for Gigabit, and we're talking with them very closely about these very difficult to reach areas. And that's important because at the minute, UK Government they're doing a consultation on hard to reach areas, and with a view to constructing methods of reaching them. Unfortunately, that outcome of that is not going to be until we think early in January. So unfortunately, until we have a view on how that's going to move forward, there's not much more I can tell you other than that. Obviously, we're working to try and get as much gigabit as we can across Scotland. A little bit before I stop for questions on new technologies. We've been talking with the likes of Starlink and Open OneWeb about more advanced satellite solutions which don't have the latency and throughput problems conventional satellite, if you like, has. So we've seen some early trials of that, and they're looking promising in terms of the user experience. Similarly, there are some R&D going on around 5G fixed wireless access, and again, seen some deployments, some trials of that giving very fast connectivity, up to gigabit connectivity over 5G infrastructure. The challenge there is the availability of spectrum and the people who own the spectrum, and also you'll be aware of some other perhaps more experimental or more future-looking solutions with the aerial platforms for providing solutions from within the atmosphere. The website I'd encourage you to look at it. Basically, all the information you've seen on the maps. Whilst you can't access the maps on the website, you can actually look at individual premises basis. I realise Councillor Mitchell has raised his hand. Do you have a question?
Yeah, John Mitchell, Harris and South Lochs. Thank you, Clive, for allowing an interruption. Not a member of the committee. Yeah, I mean, thank you for your presentation, a very comprehensive one indeed. And I
sorry, John, can I interrupt for a minute?
Yes, sure.
We're taking the Q&A at the end of the presentation.
Oh, sorry, Clive invited me. I thought it was an invitation. Sorry about that. Okay.
I'll take you in straight away at the end of Clive's presentation.
Not a problem, Chair. Thank you for that.
Apologies, probably me causing that confusion. I think we're really much at the end of the presentation anyway, so we probably aren't to questions. But just to reiterate, the checker on scotlandsuperfast.com is down. It gives information at an individual premises level. So each house and business is on here. This was in response to feedback we had from Audit Scotland for one, but also from the general public that, you know, having a view of a number of premises in a postcode or an exchange area, whilst it was better than nothing, often was misleading in so much as that, you know, especially if not every premises was going to be connected. There was a view that, you know, it wasn't that much use to the people interested in getting information about their own premises. I think that is questions, discussions. I'll stop sharing my screen now, and Chair, we can.
Very good, Clive. Thank you very much for that detailed presentation. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interest in terms of questions. So I'll go back to Councillor John Mitchell.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Sorry for that premature interruption. John Mitchell, Harris and South Lochs here. Again, thank you again, Clive, for the very comprehensive presentation, and did appreciate the slide you did on Harris explaining the obvious geographic oblique financial difficulties in trying to install a reasonable broadband connection when the houses are so widely spread. It's just a question. The slide previous to that, or two slides previous to that, I can't remember, had a list of all the various areas in terms of what access and how many homes had been. And although I noticed Scalpay, I didn't actually see the rest of Harris. Was that an oversight, or is there a reason why Harris isn't included in that information table? Thank you.
So I'd sort of probably wrongly bundled Harris and Lewis together as one line. I think that's because you know, although they are separate areas, they are one island in effect. So that was bundled together. The other point was it was really to give an indication. You know, that the full list, if you like, had quite a lot of islands on even down to sort of Vatsay and you know, some of the very smaller peninsulas. So it was really just to give an idea. I'm very happy to give a more detailed list if that's going to help.
Well, the Scalpocks will be very pleased to know that they have been elevated above and beyond the independence of Harris. But yeah, I think, I don't know if I'm speaking on behalf of the other councillors, I'm fairly sure I am, that it would be useful to see a breakdown in terms of Harris, because I know that there are certain areas in Harris present significant difficulties in accessing broadband to these areas, and it would be useful to see how that breaks down. Thank you for that, Clive.
Very happy to do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Any other questions from members? Councillor McNeill.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A very comprehensive presentation, Clive. Thank you very much. I've got a few questions as regarding the vouchers. The first one is, how many vouchers have been used in the Western Isles? You had it, I think it was slide 8 you had it. And my other question is, how many vouchers suppliers are active in the Western Isles? And another question is, how are you going to work with the communities to ensure, where possible, vouchers are combined to provide a community-wide solution? And in the R100 build in the Western Isles in 2025 to 2026 onwards for premises in the build plan, they currently are able to get an interim voucher to get a solution until what R100 build happens. The end date for the interim voucher is March 2022. Therefore, some people who will need to get full fibre in 2025 will have no support to upgrade the service for 4 or 5 years.
Did you get all that, Clive?
I think so. I'll go for it. And if I miss something, please remind me.
Yeah.
I think, so I mean, the answer, quite sadly, at the minute is, in terms of the main vouchers, none have been used in the Western Isles, and I think that it's very much down to what I think you alluded to, Councillor, in the second question about who's able to use these. We, as I said in the presentation, we're trying to encourage other operators to come, but I foresee the main user of vouchers, because there's no other competition, is OpenReach. And we work very closely with OpenReach. I think this aligns very closely with the third question, which is about how we make sure communities, when that build happens in 24-25, how no one's left behind, how we make sure that premises that could be connected through that build and could be connected additionally to contracts are identified, and how vouchers are used to fund that additional bin if it's needed. So I mentioned the tools we give to operators. So OpenReach can actually identify the premises close to their build, but to make that more effective, we have identified deployment managers who will actually follow the build of OpenReach as it happens, as they do the surveys. And as they do the surveys, they will look at how additional premises can be brought in, and if necessary, how additional vouchers can be brought in. The idea there is, we don't want to rely on communities to have to do this themselves. However, a key role of the deployment manager is also that community engagement and making information available. And we do have a deployment manager based in Stornoway. So quite alive to the challenge of the Western Isles and getting this done. And I think the last question was about just the last date for the interim voucher availability. You're correct, it is the 31st of March next year. But The main purpose of that was to allow anybody who wanted connection by the end of 2021, December, end of this month, to be able to get a connection, and that was aligned with the the initial project's timescales. That's been extended to March just to allow for anyone who wasn't aware of that, although that has been available for a couple of years now, just to make sure that they have that additional few months if they want to. That voucher.
Thank you. I've got one more question, Chair, if you don't mind. Okay. There was an understanding that the rollout would start from the outside and work in. This was what we were originally told years ago, and start with remote communities first. Given that they were not going to see the R100 build until 2025-26, and the programme is due to finish in 26-27, then we are lost. We are lost in the queue. Can you explain this?
Yeah, I mean, I can't. Unfortunately, I mean, the outside in term was coined, I think, probably not by engineers. I mean, it's not a it's just not an economical, sensible way to actually deliver broadband networks, or any network for that matter. You have to build out from the centre outwards, and we were building basically on top of the work that was done by the DSSB programme, and that's where the next tranche of build will go. The dates, and I agree. I mean, I can understand the disappointment that the 24-25 date, 25-26 date. Those are contractual dates, so they are dates when build is finished and confirmed and verified and paid for. The build happens before then. So I'm not saying that it will it'll be happening next year, but build will start ahead of that to get to those contracted dates. The build plan was bid by the bidders, so we had a fixed pot of money. We went out to the market and said, these are all the premises that need connecting. We need you to put forward the most economically advantageous tender that covers as many as possible in the shortest possible time. But what we couldn't do, and what we didn't want to do, was design that network for them, because ultimately we're a procuring body, not builders of telecoms infrastructure. So what came out of that process was the build plan as you see it, and it is unfortunate, but there had to be some premises that were built first, and some second, and some last, and this is how this contract has come about, and how it was deployed in terms of the profile of build.
Thank you, Clive.
Thank you, Councillor McNeil. Councillor Gordon Murray, then Vice Chair, Councillor Norman MacDonald, and then the convener. And there's a number of members wanting to come in online as well. Mr. Murray.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick question, and thanks to Clive for the presentation. I think it would be helpful for myself anyway to look over the figures again. So would it be possible if the presentation could be circulated to the committee?
You should have it on your iPad.
Oh, it's not on, it's not.
All right.
You might have to refresh.
You'll have to refresh.
Right, okay then, right, thanks.
If you don't have it, we'll definitely circulate.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Vice Chairman, Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And Gordon, I couldn't find it either, but I had to go back out and I got it via another circuitous route. Thanks, Clive, for the presentation. And I'm sorry if I'm going to go back and break down into what I believe is kind of my simplistic look at this. We're at the mercy of Openreach up here because most of the original infrastructure was copper wire, which nobody else could provide other than by satellite. Some folk who couldn't get broadband via their phone lines used that technology. And then I think something in the region of £1 billion was given to Openreach to completely cover, I don't know, was it the UK or the whole of Scotland? There was a lot of money originally because we were all promised 100% coverage. That's obviously going to be more difficult in areas, particularly like the base of Harris and over in Uig, where the terrain doesn't lead to quick implementation of wires, etc., cables. So if at this late stage already BT haven't installed fibre or broadband in these areas, There's obviously a difficulty with the installation and a cost implication to them, which they're not willing to meet. Now, that shortfall is obviously something that the Scottish Government are looking into bridging. Now, is it not either a case of BT have said we can't connect these areas because it's too difficult, it's going to cost too much money, therefore we need this money. Why don't SG step in and say, well, how much is it going to cost? There's the money. I don't understand what all this voucher scheme comes into things. I know different communities might go out and tender, but if you're getting 5k a house, where are you going to go? I mean, who else is going to provide it other than Openreach, other than the satellite providers? I'm guessing everybody pretty much in all these areas have access to Sky TV or a satellite TV provider. I'm sure there's a provision they can get via their dish for broadband. I'm not entirely sure if that's the case because I have fibre and point. I'm lucky enough to have it. But it's the only alternative via a satellite dish if BT aren't prepared to service these areas. If they've already said, if the infrastructure is not already there, there's a cost implication. And is it not a straightforward case of SG dealing with BT and saying, right, the base of Harris is going to cost us an extra £5 million. We're not prepared to meet that cost. Are you? Now, at 5k a house, that's probably going to be not going to make the difference either. So what chance is there for these people if between SG and Openreach, they're not prepared to meet that cost? Is it purely a case of they're going to have to rely on satellite technology to get a broadband connectivity at a speed that's now taken for granted? I mean, you can throw all the voucher schemes you like at it, but if it doesn't meet the cost of installing anything other than a satellite communication, they're never going to get the fast fibre that the rest of us are lucky to have. Thank you, Norman. Clive, can you respond to that?
I will, yeah, absolutely. And I think there is an element of there will be undoubtedly some people that the only affordable solution is a satellite connection. Now, as I said earlier, I mean, satellite, we're told and we're seeing in demonstrate some areas satellite is improving and it's becoming a usable and exciting technology. The main thrust of the main programs is there is an affordability element to this, and I'm an engineer, not a politician, but the money we put forward as and had to fight for from the Scottish Government in terms of getting this funded. Oh, sorry, when I say fight for, we had to make a business case for and articulate it was what was viewed as affordable. So the whole mechanisms of deployment is how we make this money go as far as possible with the best technology possible. And we were very aware that with the funding we have, even though it's a very large amount of money, would not connect every premises in Scotland. Hence, we had to use a voucher scheme and almost create a new market for those vouchers, which we're doing. As I said, there's about 60 odd operators now will take a voucher. The intent of the main contracts is to drive fibre build as far as possible. And once you have that fibre build much closer to the premises you want to connect, that's when it's economically possible for that £5,000 to make a difference. And that was the base of Harris example I used really. But before that, fibre was put in a substantial cost by the S4GI programme. Those areas were not viable. Yet, because of that build, the heavy lifting that has given to the infrastructure, that was then meant it was in scope and affordable within the contract. Now, as the contract premises roll out, again, these premises the fibre gets close to the most difficult premises, and will bring or should bring those within scope of the £5,000 voucher funding, especially as they can be aggregated to get to areas and groups of premises that are not immediately adjacent to the fibre build. Should I answer the question?
Okay, thanks very much, Clive. I'm now going to bring in Convener Norman MacDonald, UG and North Lochs.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Clive, for the presentation. I'm just going to start off probably from a strange place, in that some 70 years ago, Tom Johnson was the person who brought electricity into the hills and glens of the Highlands and Islands. and one would be asking questions as to what would have happened had he not done that. The reality is nobody would have been living in these areas. Now, connectivity through broadband for me is exactly the same thing. This is a commitment that government have committed to. It's been committed to through the UK government, through the Scottish government, and HIE themselves have had a significant role in delivering broadband to communities, remote communities as well. And I can tell you, villages in the Outer Hebrides and on the west coast of Scotland, if they don't have a reasonable connection, they will move away from there, and that is not what any of us would want to see happen. So I think there's a great deal of work to be done in terms of lobbying government to make sure that they fulfil the commitment they made originally. I know that HIE have made a contribution to the island of Great Bernera, which has fibre to premises. Just 2 miles across the sea from there, it would take fibre to premises to most of Uig as well. And again, I think that's something that needs some thought. I don't think there's any doubt about the strength of feeling there is with the service that is being provided in the Uig area at the moment. We spent the last 6 months trying to fight, watching people coming and tearing down aerials and putting them back up again. And it's been an absolute nightmare for people. And I've often seen a group of 5 or 6 cars parking in a place where they can see the mast at Achmore to get signal in the morning as I come into Stornoway. So I think there's a lot of work to be done yet, and the commitment of providing broadband is no different to the commitment that was given all these years ago to have hydroelectric power in homes right throughout the communities on the west coast and on the islands. So there's a great deal of work to be done yet, and it's for government to bite the bullet and deliver what was being considered to be the most effective way of providing connectivity right across the north of Scotland.
Thank you, Comhairle. Clive, I think that was a very clear statement of, I think, how we all feel about the situation. If you want to come back and...
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, as I said, I mean, I don't use this as an excuse, but I mean, I sit within the delivery wing of the digital division, Scottish Government. So my job is to deliver this. However, we are, as you can imagine, work very closely with policy colleagues, and it's policy colleagues who have sort of generated, generated the ability to actually start Scottish Government working on this broadband programme and to raise the funds. I absolutely hear what you're saying, and I've perhaps not as remote as the West Isles or some parts of the West Isles. I've worked and lived in a village where I've had to put my own wireless solution in just to get an acceptable broadband service to my home. So I do, what I'm trying to say is I do feel that pain, and I also absolutely agree with you that good broadband connectivity is as important as electricity. It's becoming just a standard connection for normal life. All I can commit to do is to take that message back to policy colleagues. There's a huge interest and a duty of care, feeling that they want to do best and well for not just the islands but all remote areas in Scotland where there's poor broadband, and that's really the genesis of the programme. And I agree there is space for it to go further, but all I can do is resolve to take that message back to to the colleagues who actually define that policy.
Okay, thanks, and we'll certainly be making representations as well. We'll go online now to Councillor Colin McMillan and then Councillor Ray McKenzie, and I think Councillor Kenny John Cloud had his hand up earlier. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a question to see if the emergency services broadband can be linked up, because there's areas in Uist where we have emergency services broadband with a non-open reach provider, Could that be linked in to get at least 4G, even if we can't get fibre speed broadband in?
I'd say as a general statement, it has in other areas. I don't know particularly about that mast. Some of the emergency services masts are different specifications. Some are very, very limited, to that emergency services use. Others I know have been opened up to public use, and I know, for example, just personal knowledge of masts on Mull, where a good 4G service has been brought into an area on the back of those emergency services mast build. So I'm very happy to take some, if you can either email me some particulars, I can have a look at your particular instance and see if we can get some more information about that particular mast. But as a principle, yes, I have seen areas where that has been brought to bear and it's worked well.
Perfect, thank you. I'll be in touch, and apologies, I've put my screen on as well. Thank you for that.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Councillor Ray Mackenzie, Stornoway South.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not on your committee, but it was just, I don't know if I picked it up correctly, but thanks, Clive, for the report, by the way. You mentioned something about cabinets and outdated or obsolete, and I wasn't quite sure. I started getting worried at that point.
No, I probably use the word obsolescence, which I think in my parlance sort of means potentially they're not here forever. They were put in a hard expense and a lot of hard work, and they're doing a really good job, and in fact they're essential. There's a wider programme across the UK to actually remove telephone exchanges and then eventually remove copper lines, so that all communications will be done over the internet. Now, I'm very aware that if you haven't got the internet, that's cold comfort. But that's what I was alluding to, that eventually there will have to be a full fibre service everywhere. But I think that's a sort of Ofcom UK government type thing, perhaps with a horizon of 20 years.
Okay.
So sorry, that was what I was alluding to when I said that about cabinets.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Kenny John Cloud.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not a member of the committee, but thank you for letting me in. Councillor Norrie MacDonald asked what I was going to ask anyway. It was really in connection with why should there be any confidence by aggregating the vouchers that, given the lack of competition, that anyone will come in and be able to provide any solution. And the other thing I was wondering was, given that there are very limited alternatives, and even broadband, satellite broadband has its own limitations, particularly with weather conditions and all sorts of things, and it can be very expensive. Is there any possibility of boosting the capacity of the I know it's old and creaking the copper distribution system now to get to reach some of these areas by some combination of technologies that can, even for a few years until there's that better final solution provided, can the copper system at all be boosted and enhanced or augmented by some other new technologies to enable these hard to reach areas to be reached? Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of the second question first, I mean, I don't think so. I think the market has moved to towards fibre and actually towards now more advanced wireless systems. So I think if we can encourage competition, and I'll answer that question in a second, the interim or even the full solution of will, if it's not fibre, will be a wireless solution, a fixed wireless access solution. In terms of successes of the voucher scheme so far, we have about 1,200 premises across Scotland connected through the schemes, and about half of them are full fibre to the premises. So it's not just funding wireless solutions; it is allowing some operators to put full fibre into people's houses. I think, as I said several times, we are very alive to that challenge, particularly on the Western Isles, where there is not an alternative operator market ready to step up and start taking these vouchers. But we are working with a number of operators to try and encourage that expansion. And also, I mean, I think, although the vouchers are all open to any operator, I think where we will be successful is where we encourage Openreach, as they build the contracted network, to use the vouchers to expand. And we're seeing that in the South contract, which started a year ahead of the North contract. They are putting in around 15% more premises than contracted, because they are actually connecting opportunistically to premises close to where the contracted build is. And we are now looking at how we can proactively identify these and identify them through the deployment managers, and where we know Openreach is going to survey, to actually at that point look at all the potential for vouchers and non-voucher connectivity. So a voucher where initial funding is needed, or not a non-voucher where actually that same infrastructure can cover other premises, even though they're not on the contract.
Thank you, Clive.
Thank you very much. Can I just add one final? If you're confident that the voucher scheme will provide sufficient inducements to the likes of Openreach to come in, why not do that directly in the first instance, rather than have the uncertainty of communities not knowing what size of capacity they need to garner in order to make it appealing, if indeed it can be a bit appealing?
Yeah, that's a good question. The actual, the amount of money available to be contracted was limited, and then we had to split that across Scotland. We weren't clear or sure at that point how much coverage we would get, or even what technology would be bid. The actual technology neutral. So we went out for, and we've got to keep reminding ourselves, we went out for a super fast service, 30 megabits per second as a minimum. What was bid back by Openreach was full fibre connectivity, and for that money available, they could do the premises that they were able to contract to, we were able to contract to. There were other bidders who fell by the way, but initially there were people who wanted to put wireless networks all over the country, potentially with a fairly short-lived, from a technology point of view, solution. So in terms of the quality and coverage, Openreach won that contract, and that's about how much money was identified for the job. When we were able to see what was left over, we didn't, we weren't able to run another procurement, because again that would have taken a long time. But we were working at the voucher scheme because we knew we'd have to fill in the gaps. What we weren't until the bids were in and awarded was how big that gap would be.
Thank you very much, Clive. Finally, Vice Chairman Norman MacDonald.
Yeah, thanks again for letting me back in. Clive, this might sound like I'm having a dig at you or not. I know you're an engineer and you're contracted to do this. It's more to do with the general approach to this. We've established it can be done. We've established it should be done, and the technology is there to do it. There's an issue with geography and geology, obviously, but as the convener pointed out, every single household in these islands and highlands has got electricity. Now, we've already established that connectivity is a defining characteristic of rural depopulation, as outlined as well by the convener. So why do we get to 98% connectivity and then start a voucher scheme? It's basically because it's too costly. So if you've established that you can get to 98%, but the rest is just going to cost too much per household, you're either going to have to be serious about rural depopulation or connectivity or not. To get to 98% and start a voucher scheme and start putting it out to tender and asking people to bid into this, it's a cost implication, and it's just too costly. Unless you're prepared to meet the cost of connectivity, go the extra however many hundred or million of pound, it's not going to happen. So if you're going to be serious about connecting the whole of Scotland, then the cost element has to be borne by Scottish Government and say, go ahead and do it. We're going to connect the whole of Scotland. Getting to 98% and starting this scheme, I'm sorry, but it's fapping the issue.
Thank you, Vice Chairman, and you're absolutely right, and I'll come back to that at the end and wrapping up. But to be fair to Clive, I don't think it's to whom that should be addressed.
No, it's not addressed to Clive. No.
So with that in mind, I want to bring in, sorry, Clive.
No, sorry, no, I just appreciate the sentiment. Yeah, and as I say, I'll pass on these messages to policy colleagues, but I'm sure through other auspices you will be making that point as well.
Okay, finally, Paul Steele.
Thank you for that, Madam Chair. Paul Steele, not a member of your committee. Ironically, the warning we had on the screen there, poor internet quality, kind of sums it up. But my question was going to be about the maps that are in your presentation. Really interesting, and it'd be really interesting to see the different areas as well. So if you could share that, that would be really useful. My question relates to, I'm going to give an example for South Uist. There was a small village just outside Lochboysdale, and it was part of the previous cabinet setup, but then it got pulled at the last minute due to cost reasons, and it was going to be in the R100. It's not. So it's part of the voucher scheme situation. The fibre is there. It's not going to cost too much to do. So it's going to be covered by the cost of the vouchers. You know, it's going to be doable. So my question is then, why was that not included? So this, you know, the examples you've got with the red, the green and the orange dots, are they set or will they change? And my final point is, if they were to come up with a voucher scheme and it was BT or Openreach installing it, is there a requirement for maintenance on behalf of the people who are using the vouchers, or would that be covered by Openreach?
Right, so again, last question first. The operator, the voucher is for capital cost only. So once that premises is installed and connected to the network, it becomes part of the Openreach asset or state, which they will look after and provide services on behalf of ISPs over. The other question about the previous bill that was pulled due to cost, I mean, again, I can't comment on that specifically, but I can look into it. But what we do, what is a challenge for us is just the status of data for all these premises. There's 2.9 million premises in Scotland. When we started the programme, there was about 2.8 million. And they're not all new builds. These are premises that either been mislabeled by councils, mislabeled by operators. So, you know, we have a report from operators saying they're connected to certain premises, and it turns out they're not. What that meant was that they were not in the programme to be, you know, to be considered. So we do have through the website the ability to actually, for homeowners to query that if they think they should be involved, should be included. But also we, you know, as we get to the survey stages, we can look at premises in the vicinity of build and ask the question why they are not, you know, in the contract. And the actual contract construction, it allows the people doing the survey to look at premises in the vicinity and say these are not connected and they should be. Equally, it says these premises are already connected and they should be in the contract, so we can remove them. But in terms of that, you know, that area you mentioned where there was a cabinet under the DSSP programme, I can certainly look at that and see why it's been missed out and come back to you with more of a sensible answer.
Thank you very much. Are you okay with that? Yeah. I think we've given this subject a very good airing today, and so we should, because it's absolutely crucial to our future. And our objective as a council is 100% coverage for all our communities. And to be perfectly honest, this programme does not even touch the sides. Literally, it doesn't touch the sides in terms of a lot of communities are going to be excluded. And to be quite frank, the voucher scheme is quite patronising. But we want to take this forward, and I think the comparison the convener made with Tom Johnson bringing electricity to the Highlands and Islands, this is exactly the same for us today, how important it is to our social and economic development, and especially in this age of working from home. So it's really crucial that we bring this forward. And as the Vice Chairman suggested, I think we want to press forward and make representations to government about fully funding 100% coverage across all our communities, and we'll be doing that, and perhaps we can add that as an additional recommendation to this report. But in the meantime, Clive, I want to thank you for your time and for the presentation and the questions and the answers that you've dealt with over the last hour. So many thanks.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. And as I said, I'm very happy to come back for future committees to give an update on progress.
Good afternoon. Thank you again.
Bye-bye.
So do members agree to note the report and presentation and an additional recommendation around making further representations to the Scottish Government regarding the rollout of this programme? Thank you. Item 1 is the minute of the meeting of the 22nd of September 2021 for your approval. Item 2 is the minute of the Crofting Joint Consultative Committee that met on the 17th of September. You will note that we circulated a response from the Cabinet, well, from the Office of the Cabinet Secretary, some concerns we raised at that meeting around the CAGS statistics and the Crofter Housing Grant Scheme, and also around the goose management scheme and our desire to see an impact assessment being carried out. So that response was circulated, and again, we were disappointed to note that Nature Scott will not be undertaking an impact assessment of the scheme. These issues were raised again at the cross-party group that met on the 17th of November, and the Cabinet Secretary was present then, so we will be, and she was made aware of these issues again, and she's going away and coming back to us hopefully with a response that will be more positive in regards to the issue of the goose management scheme at least. So that's just a way of an update, and we'll have more discussions in the future about that. So that minute is for noting.
Sorry, Chair, just very briefly, in terms of the Croft House Grant Scheme, I think there needs to be a really concerted effort to try and take it back to where it used to be. And I know that there's been real challenges in doing that, and I know that it's something that if we lose that completely, then it's going to be an absolute disaster for our community.
Absolutely. And just thank you. Can we remind me another issue that we raised with the Cabinet Secretary was to press her. There's been a big underspend in the scheme year on year, and we pressed her to reintroduce the loan element of the scheme, which had been withdrawn some time ago. So there's plenty wiggle room financially to reintroduce the loan element of that scheme. So that's just by way of an update to members, and like I said, we'll be discussing these issues, I'm sure, well into the future. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Members are asked to clear any interest they have in any items of the agenda. We have members to express why they're declaring interest in the item concern. Members in the chamber, please do so. You know the drill in terms of the declarations of interest. So there's no declarations of interest. That's fine. Item 4 we've just dealt with. Item 5 is performance management for the second quarter 21-22. The report is for noting and provides an overview of the Communities Department business plan and related performance for economic development and planning in quarter 2. And Joe McPhee is going to speak to this report.
Yes, thanks, Chair. The details at 6.1. In Heritage, the key activity has been on opening the museum and the archive to the public and managing the flow of visitor activity. The team has continued to provide support to Heritage Forum and to the various Comhairle, as well as continuing to support the delivery of the Great Place project strategy and action plan. The projects that the team have been involved in and successfully secured funding for are progressing well. The Digitoch project, the Get Into Summer project and the Sonic project. In terms of staffing, we've failed to recruit for the Conservation Officer post now twice, so we're giving that some further consideration. And we got some funding for a Gaelic Collections Officer, but also failed to recruit for that following that process. So we're having to think through the recruitment for these posts. In terms of archaeology, ongoing work with the archaeologist and good progress on updating the historic environment record. And we'll be we're doing some testing on that very shortly, and hopefully at some point we'll provide links to members so they can go on and see some of the details in the historic environment record. In terms of planning services, development management, case numbers continue above average, and we continue to give priority to determining cases. The development planning team busy with supplementary guidance activity and national planning framework for activities. Similarly, building standards, above average number of inquiries, and we're still working our way through the recruitment of a building standards apprentice following an apprenticeship framework. The business gateway activity, as you can see, has also been very significant for the quarter. And it's interesting to note that a lot of that activity is still COVID related. The team have also been involved in the recovery grant scheme and also in the Scotland Loves Local gift card activity. The leader activity has continues to focus on managing and supporting the projects that have been successful. And they've also been awarded funding to look at a couple of projects that will be delivered by the LAG and supported by the LAG. And I've detailed those at 6.6. In terms of the wider activities around fisheries and marine resources, regeneration and economic development, focus of activity has largely been on supporting Islands Deal OBCs. And most of the team have been involved one way or another in all of these OBCs, and that was a great effort by the team. In terms of key projects and activities, good progress across all of these projects and activities. 4 projects successful for the RCGF and taking them forward to round 2. These are in Itirch, Comhairle and Tymor in Priasclage and Grogery Steadings in South Uist. In terms of activity around local government benchmarking, well, these activities are ongoing, and noting that the library activity and benchmarking will be taken forward now through Education and Children's Services Committee. We've estimated the outturn at 8.1 and noted at 8.2 that at Q2 we're showing an overspend associated with the planning application for the spaceport service, spaceport project, and planning services forecasting a surplus, while heritage is expected to outturn to budget. So this is just a flavour of the activity in Q2, Chair, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. A lot going on there and very good progress being made as well. Any questions? Councillor Angus McCormack.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Joe, for your report. I'm interested in the section on heritage, and I'm disappointed, obviously, that we haven't managed to recruit to these posts that you had. Am I right in thinking that in addition to these posts that I mentioned here, there are other posts, for example, one in relation to the Great Place project that we've managed to get funding for? And I'm just wondering how we can take this matter forward of engaging with people to come and work with us here. I'm thinking, at the back of my head of the apprenticeship scheme, but that's a long-term scheme, I imagine. So where do we go when we're looking for a conservation officer, for example? Where do we look for people of that who are qualified to do that type of thing? I imagine that they're possibly thin on the ground, but is there any way that we can, have we got anybody within the system whom we can bring on to be a conservation officer? That type of approach. Yeah.
Or even a secondment opportunity for someone in another local authority. Mr. McPhee?
Yes, thanks, Chair. In terms of the Great Place, we are finalising within the steering group the details of how we can put together a package of support for heritage service activity. And that includes, in particular, the Great Place project delivery, because we will need a resource to deliver the strategy and the action plan, which you've agreed and has been supported by all the partners to the strategy. And that includes projects such as the Year of Homecoming. And HIE have already made some support available to support the Homecoming project, and are very supportive of proposals for the Great Place project. We're also having discussions with Heritage Lottery Fund and other potential funders to support that. So we are putting I hope the final touches to a strategy for support for the heritage sector. In terms of recruitment, it's a challenge. I think our deliberations are around can we go down an apprenticeship route? Well, we could, but it's a long process, and a conservation officer post is quite a specialist post. And of course, you've got to manage the post and manage the person. So there would be a significant overhead on the heritage team. We could reach out to other local authorities who run independent museum type services, such as Highland Life in Highland, and we've got a good relationship with them. Or we can look at creating some sort of specification for a consultancy type activity on some kind of framework. Our preference is to recruit, no question about that, and to get somebody here. We've gone to a recruitment has covered very specialist sort of publications where you would normally expect to recruit this type of activity, but it seems to be a feature across a number of sectors. So it's a major challenge, and one we haven't quite got the answer to, but we will need, and we are giving it sort of full consideration. So very much in our priority, almost top of our priority list to resolve if we can.
Thank you, Joe. Councillor Ian McNeill.
Thank you for the report, Joe, and I was particularly pleased to listen to the webinar on the spaceport a couple of weeks ago. It was very good, very well presented. Could you give the rest of us a bit of an update on the spaceport? And I'm aware that we're just about to put the planning permission in. Has this happened or not?
Mr. McPhee.
Yes, thanks, Chair. The public engagement seminar went very well, and members, of course, can listen to that, and the link, I think, can be distributed, because I think it's now on YouTube. And I think those who were present got a flavour of the complexity of the project, and of course could see the type of questions that were being asked and responded to in terms of the project. In terms of the project itself, most of the activity is focused around submission of the planning application, and in particular the preparation of the environmental impact assessment, which is very, very significant indeed. And the other activity is finalising our submission to Highlands Lands Enterprise, and we hope Scottish Government and the UK Space Agency for a business plan for a package of support for the sector. And members will be aware that the spaceport is one of the Islands Deal projects. And so the other key activity is the development of the outline business case for the spaceport. In terms of the planning application, I'm informed by Alison McCorkadale, who's specifically working on this, as you know, that we are making the very, very final revisions following the seminar and following some other comments from stakeholders and a couple of the subcontractors are just requiring a little bit of additional time to complete the critical chapters. So we had hoped that we would submit yesterday, but I think based on the other comments that have come in literally in the last few days, the revised date is the 8th of December. So that's where we currently stand. But it's very much very final revisions. We won't be doing any further revisions after the 7th, and we will be submitting on the 8th.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McPhee.
Okay, going to go now to Councillor Callum McMillan and then Councillor Kenny John McLeod.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for missing the seminar, Joe. It's to do with spaceport as well. I've just realised there's that light behind me. I'm in. That's my view from the window here. So I'm in sunny Stornoway. Can't compete with some of the other.
Sorry, Callum, for interrupting. Callum, sorry for interrupting. I'm going to ask the director to come in just now.
Can I just remind members, and I know you will be mindful of this, that the spaceport will be very soon a live planning application. So members want to be very, very careful that they don't say anything either pro or against the spaceport that may prejudice their position if they are going to be involved in the decision-making process.
Okay, bear that in mind, members. Thank you for alerting us to that, Director.
Thank you, Director. It was more, have we changed the scope? Apologies for missing the seminar. Have we changed the scope from what was envisaged maybe last year to what's currently in the proposals? So I've sort of deliberately kept out of the nitty-gritty, but are we still looking at the same sort of proposals as we were looking at last year?
Joe.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yes, very much so. I think, in addition to the development of the EIA, we've been looking at developing our business plan, as I alluded to, and the OBC. A significant element of that is looking at market research and market demand, and we've also been undertaking activities in relation to the market and responding to opportunities that have presented themselves to us in terms of the market. So the focus of the current activity is on suborbital, and the focus of the environmental impact assessment and the planning application is suborbital, and no significant change to the detail of the planning application in terms of the road down to Skolthbeg and then a small launch pad and platform for suborbital activity. So no significant change to that scope, but we always have to be aware of the opportunities in the market. So that's what I would comment, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McPhee. Kenny John McLeod.
Thank you, Chair. Not a member of your committee. Just looking at the financial implications of the at 8.2, a tremendously exciting project, the spaceport, but I'm quite surprised that the level of overspend of 200k being reported there. Presumably there was a realization from the outset that was going to be a fairly complex application, and there would be significant environmental impact assessments to be undertaken. So to be reporting an overspend, not an actual budget, but an overspend of that, and that being directly associated with a planning application, it just surprises me somewhat. Is there any one particular element that significantly increased the costs to account for that level of overspend?
Just to follow on, they are in a surplus at the end of the process. Mr. McPhee.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I think it's a good question. We didn't set an initial budget for the activity, but the activity is incredibly complex, and it's had to respond to the requests from the key stakeholders, of which some of which, as you'll be aware, are statutory consultees. And it's taken them and ourselves time to get our heads around what exactly is required for an EIA of this nature and for this type of activity. So that has contributed significantly to it. I think in comparison to other areas, the cost of developing their EIAs has certainly run into millions. Some of that has been funded from other resources by them, but up to now, most of the resources provided to the Comhairle have come from the Comhairle and from HIE supporting the activity. It should be noted, and maybe I should have noted this, that the support, the business planning activity that we've undertaken and we're submitting to HIE does include an element of costs that have already been incurred. And we've discussed that with HIE, and I will provide more detail of that, I would anticipate at Q3. But I wanted just to highlight that at Q2, that this is our estimate at this stage. So I appreciate the point, and I think it's something that we're sort of very mindful of.
Thank you, Mr. McPhee. Okay, the report is for noting, members. Thank you. Item 6 now is Performance Management 21-22 second quarter, covering subjects relevant to our own committee, and the director is here to speak to that report.
Thank you, Chair. The elements relating to your own committee are in regard to energy, starting at paragraph 6.18 of the report. In very brief terms, the critical elements over the last quarter have been in regard to preparing for the Context for Difference allocation auction, which we believe will happen in Q1, expecting to outcome in April 2022. So that will be an extremely important outcome for us. Anticipation of Lewis Wind Power achieving their contract in that allocation round, which should trigger the Ofgem approval of the needs case. The offshore, ScotWind offshore leasing round has been ongoing over the last period, and we've been engaged with a number of developers and community interests on the west side of Lewis, developing memoranda of understanding to help these communities if these development projects go ahead. Out of Hebrides Net Zero Hub, the development of the outline business case for the Islands deal has been a key work stream, and we've also achieved support through the Green Growth Accelerator from the Scottish Government, which will bring an additional £150,000 into the project to help deliver the business plan and to begin an element of spatial master planning work. If that is successful, it could potentially lead into an additional £10 million worth of capital funding. So these, Chair, were the critical elements of work over the last quarter. Happy to leave it at that, but happy to take any questions as well.
Thank you, Director. It's very encouraging, informative. Any questions?
Chair, just very briefly in relation to the housing services aspect of it. First of all, I would like to.
I'm sorry, Camilla, that's not relevant to our committee. The housing, that's for communities and housing. Am I correct, Director?
Yep. Okay.
Is that okay? Okay. We're now that is for noting. Sorry, Mr. McCormick.
All right, Chair, thank you very much. I wanted to ask a question in regard to the town centre gas network. where quite a bit of work has already been done. But I did see reported in the press last week, there was quite a bit on Reporting Scotland about a development at Whiteley, where the UK government are sponsoring the creation of a facility for the creation of hydrogen for the use in heavy goods vehicles. In particular, buses were mentioned. And the Minister, Greg Hands, was going on at great length about how this was the future for hydrogen. And then his Under-Secretary of State, in a separate piece that I read in the newspaper, was saying that hydrogen would never be used for heating in homes, that it would only be used for heavy-duty goods vehicles and the like. And I'm just obviously concerned as to what the implications of these kind of statements are for what we are trying to do here locally. Have you come across these bits of pieces?
No, Chairman, I haven't come across the press reports Mr. McCormack is referring to. But I think it's fair to say that the hydrogen and the development of the hydrogen economy is still at a very early stage. And there are a number of different work streams being piloted and tested. And as you can see, the Scottish Government's green growth, it is Pathfinder status, which suggests it is exploring a number of different methodologies to introduce hydrogen into various different supply chains. So it gives us confidence that the Scottish Gas Network, is very keen on seeing a hydrogen project in Stornoway and exploring how the gas network in Stornoway could be swapped out for a hydrogen network. Given that they are a key partner in this work, that gives you confidence. And similarly, our own fleet, we were discussing with colleagues in municipal services how, our fleet can be, over a period as the technology develops, be transitioned into hydrogen. So there are a range of different forms of deployment of hydrogen, all of which are at a very early stage of exploration. We think that we have real opportunity with what we're developing in hydrogen in the Outer Hebrides. I think it's very credible. It's credible to the extent that the UK government have put £11 million through the Islands Deal into it, and the Scottish Government are signalling that they will, through the Green Growth Accelerator, put £10 million into it. So, these elements or these funding sources, give us confidence that we've got a good, credible project. That isn't to say that there isn't a lot of testing still to be done and a lot of work still to be done over the next period to deliver that. I think it's fair to say that there are a lot of testing going on across the UK in these things. But I think both the UK and Scottish Government sees the Hebrides as in a reasonably leading position in regard to what we're doing with the Energy Hub.
Thank you. I am somewhat reassured by that, but I mean, in particular, the Under-Secretary for State, who I think is Lord Callanan, he's quoted in the press as, being quite definitive about that. And it concerns me that a leading politician in regard to the use of hydrogen in the future is making statements like that. And I just wondered if, it could, I wouldn't want it to impact on what we're trying to do ourselves, is basically what I'm saying.
I would put more weight on what our own director is saying than a Lord. So I would take reassurance from it. But I'm sure we're interacting with government all the time on these issues, so I'm sure that we can seek clarification.
I'm sure we can we're speaking to government at various different levels, so I'm sure we can engage further and see what the Lord had to say, and how we can engage further on that.
Very good. So, and as far as this committee's interests are concerned, the report is set for noting by members. Item 7 is marine planning. To report the regional marine plan progress update. The acquisition of regional marine planning powers has been a long-term ambition of the corner, and the waters around these islands form the largest in Scotland, covering 23% of the total inshore region. Agreement has been reached with Marine Scotland on a timeline and resources to implement the development of a regional marine plan for the Outer Hebrides. And subject to the coroner's approval, take forward the phased implementation of this plan, recruitment of staff will be initiated for consideration by HR subcommittee in early next year. This is welcome news, and I will ask Joe to speak to the report. And Isla is also available to answer any of the technical detail. Joe.
Yes, thanks, Chair. The report is just that, an update on our approach to regional marine planning and also delivery of the aligned Crown Estate pilot. And we've set out the timeline and the resources required in order to progress these activities. And we've had excellent discussions with colleagues in Marine Scotland. So it's really at this stage a progress report for noting. We will be doing some further detail on the staffing, the resourcing, and the financial activities and commitments that are required for that. I've noted in the report the commitment from the Scottish Government of 70,000. It is going to be made on an annual basis because it's the way that they work, although there is a commitment there for a 3-year package. And the balance of funding to come from the funding that was allocated from the Crown Estate funds for regional marine planning. Our estimate of staffing is presented, but we will have to look at the financial implications and the staffing required to meet that available budget. So more detail to come forward, Chair, as you've said, through the various processes, and we would hope to present a report to HRSAB as early as we can in 2022. So it's great to see movement on this finally. Happy to take any questions or indeed refer to Isla, who will have more of the technical detail.
Absolutely great news. Any comment or questions from members? I can't see the slide. Sorry, I couldn't see your light. Carry on. Mr. McNeill.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Joe, for that report. You mentioned Crown Estates again, and I'm aware that, as far as I know, we haven't had news of the Crown Estate settlement for this year. Have you got any update on that by any chance?
Chair. I'm going to bring the leader in.
You should look left more often, Chair. Yes, thanks for the question, Councillor McNeill. We will be bringing an update on the Crown Estate position to Policy Resources next Wednesday.
Thank you, Leader.
Okay, clear. Any more comment or questions on that item? If not, then the recommendations are at 3.1 for your approval. Item 8 is the Outer Hebrides food growing strategy. It's a report. There was a report to this committee in March and touched on the local food production and the smart local marketing of produce. And the Corner is committed to support local food production as part of our economic recovery strategy. The requirement of each local authority under the Community Empowerment Act to prepare a food growing strategy for its area. As the report identifies, island authorities differ in mainland authorities, and this report proposes a way forward for the Outer Hebrides food growing strategy. Resources will be required in order to fully exploit opportunities, and the report also seeks consideration of the Community Food and Drink Development Fund to increase economic value gained from the high quality primary produce of the Outer Hebrides. And Joe is here to answer any questions. Or do you want to?
Yes. Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think the report sets out the requirements, the strategy requirements of the strategy. However, as you can appreciate, unlike the mainland authorities, we have no significant allotments and no history of providing allotments. But what we do have is of course crofts and access to land for growing food. We have been involved and are involved in a significant and a growing number of actions around community food growing and food and drink. Some of that activity is captured through the Islands Deal in the primary industries OBC submission, and other work we've done around supporting projects in areas. And I mentioned earlier, one of the RCGF projects is at Grogery Steadings, and that's a good example of a community food and drink project and local food production. And we are picking up, significant interest across the islands in this activity. So, while not specifically looking at producing a separate strategy, we feel there's enough activity going on to provide evidence of the activity, the activities that the Comhairle and partners are engaged in around food and drink. But we will embark on a strategy with partners, because I think it'll be useful to highlight the opportunities, I think, from our own economic recovery strategy and from other activities to this particular opportunity. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McPhee. Any questions on that item? Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chair. Not a member of your committee. Joe, just going back to the Barron Battersea Area Forum, I know some of the work they did early on was looking at branding in terms of the produce that's kind of being made on the island and being sold. I'm just wondering, has that been taken any further as part of that forum? And I mean, it's all the way through the document. That's probably what this is going to be all about anyway. But I'm just wondering if you could give me a wee update on that.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I don't think it's been taken on specifically since we had some of those early discussions in the forum, but it is something that has come to the fore through the development of the OBC for the primary industries, and also a significant consideration for one of the other projects that is looking to develop in Harris and use the Harris brand. That's, as you know, looking to build on the activities such as the Harris Distillery and the investment they've made in the Harris brand, and of course ensuring that the Harris brand, whenever it's used beyond its current use, that it retains that sort of quality and standard. The same, I think, can be true of Barra. So not a dissimilar situation in terms of gin and potential plans for expansion there. So I think it also emerged, I think, as part of the feedback from the OBC for the food and drink programme. I think one of the questions that arose there, and we will incorporate this into the food and drink OBC, was around the wider branding opportunities, not just at local level, but at Hebrides level. And of course, we still have some significant materials that we've used previously for the development of the Hebrides brand, which we can use to support any local activity that areas might wish to take forward. And I think the other activity it's worth noting is that place-based activity is very much to the fore, and I think the use of brand in specific island areas is a potential opportunity that we may well be missing out on. So something that's very much in our minds, and I think we'll make sure it's on the agenda, I think, for the next meeting of the Barra Economic Recovery Forum.
Thank you, Mr. McPhee. Councillor Alison MacLeod and then Councillor John Norman MacLeod.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for the report. On the subject of branding, some island groups like Orkney have been extremely successful. Several years ago, I think quite a considerable sum of money was put into a project called the Outer Hebrides brand. I mean, whatever happened to it? Or obviously wasn't successful because we don't see, food products marketed as Outer Hebrides food. I mean, is it still around or has it disappeared?
Sure.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I kind of alluded to it in my previous response. The development of the Hebrides brand and the various brand devices was indeed supported significantly by the Comhairle and other partners. It was very much a matter then for the industry to take on the opportunity to develop the brand. To what extent that's been successful is probably something we would have to look into in a little bit more detail. But I think you have seen the emergence of the Hebrides and the Hebrides brand over the last period. Whether that was related to the initial work, I'm not entirely sure. But there is, I think, more awareness of the power and the potential behind a Hebrides brand, or indeed products that are produced here that come from the Outer Hebrides. So I think there are a number of examples out there. So I think I wouldn't say it was a waste of time. I think the exercise was incredibly useful. But at the time, the discussions with the industry and the industry leaders, it was very much a matter for the industry to take it forward from that point.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McPhee. Yes, Director.
Just to add to what Mr. McPhee was saying, we actually were looking at that branding work that was done a number of years ago, and I think that branding work remains good. The underpinning philosophy behind it and the provenance and the branding devices it came up with are still good. And as Joe suggests, there wasn't, different sectors of the industry didn't take it forward the way we thought. But I think there's value in revisiting that work, dusting that work down, because I still think it is good, and there is a goodly percentage of it that is still relevant and still can be utilised. So I think we would take forward, a relook at that work and see what can be reused to take forward over the next period.
Okay, that's good. Very good. John Norman, McLeod.
Thank you, Chair, and also thank you, Joe, for the report. I welcome the report. It's very good, very interesting, actually, hopefully for the future of the growing of crops, livestock, etc., etc. Just a couple of pointers. There's not so much questions, but more pointers. It'd be great to see sort of a local market in each ward, which would be excellent if we could possibly get that. Now, as for the growing of fruit and veg, yes, inside in the polycrops, and we're seeing a lot of polycrops going up, which is very excellent to see, and they are substantial buildings, and they're designed to sort of, basically to stand up to our weather. They can stand up to, I think it's 125 miles per hour gale sort of thing. What I was mentioning about the fruit and veg, I mean, years ago, I think I might have mentioned this before, there was at one time a subsidy available for growing fruit and veg, especially vegetables. And it was the late 60s, early 70s. Now, maybe that's something we could write to and ask Scottish Government, would they reconsider that? Maybe just for the islands ourselves, I don't know. Maybe it's an idea. The other thing I want to mention is, what's been happening with the beef and lamb with regards to Australia and New Zealand and the deal that was done to the UK. I'm afraid that, to me, is going to hit our production of livestock. That's why I think it's going to hit us hard. Not necessarily in the next couple of years, but after that, you can see it when there'll be far cheaper meat coming in imported. And we couldn't possibly be able to produce without a severe loss. I mean, we don't make hardly any money on it anyway, as most people know anyway. But definitely to think about producing more of that and even making the island self-sufficient. Right now, we're probably maybe 6 months of the year we can get our own meat and all that from the islands. But the other 6 months, maybe it's something to look at. One thing
that came up in a meeting a couple of weeks ago I was at. It was to do with it was a common grazing sort of workshop, and there happened to be a woman on there, and she was in what they call the CACS reform group, and they're looking into the CACS and how to improve it. And what they did come up with, which was quite good news if you're a crofter and all that, what they're doing is, instead of, you get your 80% and your 60% CACS, but what they're now wanting is that the producer or the crofter only has to find the 20 or the 40% and not find the full 100% first. So basically, if you're doing a project for 10,000 and you're getting 80% if you're under 40, well, which obviously I'm not, but so you'd only have to find the 2,000 instead of finding the 10,000 before you get the 8,000 back. So that was good. It was brought up at a meeting with Fergus Ewan a few years ago. But there are things definitely that can be helped. And I saw in the report subletting of land. That, yes, it can be done, but there's a wee bit more work to it than actually just going to sublet a part of the land, because if whoever's subletting probably has to have what they call a business reference number, and you have to go through the department, etc., etc. So there's a wee bit of work involved in that, but it can be done. But definitely, yeah, I think we are moving forward, and it'd be great to see our Ireland self-sufficient, and it's good to see that people are actually to produce a lot more of their own. Thank you. Thanks, Donald. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. MacLeod, for those observations. I mean, producers are facing challenging times, but we've got to be really confident in what we produce and branding it and exporting it. I mean, we all remember Heather Isle Meats. That was a successful brand for a period of time, and hopefully something that could be replicated in the future. Joe, do you have any comments to make, Mr. MacLeod's observations?
No, these are good comments, Chair, and I think we alluded in the report to some sort of community sort of food and drink fund, and I think the points made by members have just reiterated the need for some sort of a fund, if funds can be available to support that activity, because there is clearly huge interest in this. So we look forward to subject to available resources to pushing ahead with some of this activity.
Thank you. The recommendations are 3.1 there for your agreement. And we now move on to item 9, and that's the Outer Hebrides Visitor Infrastructure Plan. And following on from previous discussion at this committee in March, and also with regard to the issues raised Transportation Committee at the last series, it's good to see the progress of a visitor infrastructure plan. Whilst we welcome the recent growth in the tourism sector, it is clear that the increased volume of people has put pressure on our infrastructure, services and resources, and this needs to be addressed urgently. Strategic Tourism Infrastructure Development funding of 25k was awarded to the Comhairle in June, and together with a contribution of 5k from the department, is hoped to develop a strategic solution through the creation of the Outer Hebrides Visitor Management Plan to assist the longer-term requirements of managing growth in this sector. And Sarah is here to speak to the report and answer any questions.
Chair, I think Sarah may have had to
go,
leave. Yeah. I'll speak to the report myself. I think we've set out the details of the report and the details of the grant from Mrs. Scotland at 5.4. The consultants are already working on some desk-based research before going out to further consultation on this opportunity in the new year. It's a very kind of welcome development and will help us significantly in putting together our visitor infrastructure plan. So good progress and great to see that happening. In addition to what's been going on, of course, there's been some activities around the various rangers that were employed. This was funded through Nature Scot, through the Better Places scheme, and they were providing visitor advice and signposting, making contact with visitors and directing them to the nearest services and suitable parking, camping, waste disposal sites. Sarah has also briefed me in terms of, some ongoing discussions with Scottish Water around waste disposal points and some sort of positive discussions. So I think good progress all round, and we look forward to seeing the first draft of that plan early in the new year. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Very swift progress, really, when taking into account just the last few days we were discussing it. Any questions or observations at the moment? No? Very good. So that's members are asked to agree the report. And lastly, it's item 10, reports outstanding, and that's for noting. And just to note that the next scheduled meeting of the committee is on Wednesday, the 2nd of February. And I want to take this opportunity to thank officers for the director and officers for all their hard work and support over the last year, and you, the members, for your contribution to the work of the committee. And I wish you all a Noa Clear and Brianna Bahur when it comes. Thank you for your attendance.